Hey everybody, Mac the Monster here. Back with another hero. We got Hawkeye here. For the most part, Hawkeye people should be happy. You have been buffed, and you've been buffed pretty well. Some skill changes. The first of note that I noticed was a tear gas arrow with the damage twice per second. It's definitely doing a lot more damage than it ever did. It also weakens the enemy's ability to deal damage, which will help you on those boss fights. However, the amount of damage it's weakening is kind of negligible. So, with the way that damage has been increased, minus 32 damage is kind of nothing. But it's something anyways on there, I guess. Another buff has been combat training. A lot of dodge and some physical and mental defense rating. That part is just basically kind of icing on the cake. That's a lot of dodge. I mean, 1 point's giving you 600 dodge. It's just a lot of dodge. You don't have to gear dodge at all. You are now going to be not really where the dodge characters are, but you are very dodgy. And with your defense, if you look, I have level 30, 2,172 defense. On point with everybody else, 34.5% damage reduction. So that's not terrible at all. And what else did we see? Oh, wave of arrows. Very, very low damage. This is now completely almost useless. The damage does not scale well with points. It won't kill anything. And it costs a lot of spirit. So that's been nerfed. I don't know why they don't want Hawkeye to have a room clearing ability, but Wave of Arrows could be a very fun ability if they put some damage to it. It would have to do somewhere in the vicinity of 1,000 to 1,200 damage an arrow to kill everything it hits. Just trash. That is. Masterful Archery. Where are we? This is kind of buffed. What they did is there's more DPS, no more damage per second on the dot, more damage being done. Obviously, they had to increase the damage, but it's a little bit stronger than the 4 to 5 time damage that everything else has, and definitely the damage per second on the dot factor is definitely increased. So that's a nice little buff. Precise aim, there's a buff there, getting a lot more crit rating. Even though there's diminishing returns on crit rating, it's really hard to hit to that level of the bell curve before you start really losing on crit. 2,000 crit you got to hit before you start losing, really. And then Vibranium arrows, they changed into super brutal strike rating. You are one of the few that get a passive for brutal strikes. I don't even know why they call them. They're super crits. You hit wicked hard. Instead of plus 50% damage, you're doing plus 250% damage, or a total of 300% damage. Actually, so plus 200% damage. That's 150% more damage than a regular crit. So that's really, really nice. And it appears that they did do a little more rework with Destructive Volley. It actually hits semi-hard. You get 7 shots, getting you somewhere around the vicinity of 15 grand of damage. Bosses have a lot of health, so that's not going to one-shot a boss or anything, but it's going to hurt the boss, and the boss isn't going to like it, so you will. And that's really all the changes I could see that stood out. You should see changes on all characters, 4 to 5 times the damage rating. All the health on mobs have been shot through the roof, so that damage increase is really just kind of a difference in play style. It's not a buff, it's not really a negative, it's just normalization. And so, gonna do Hawkeye's build here. And it's pretty much the move and shoot build. Still, I don't see any reason not to do it, especially with all the buffs. but obviously with the buff changes, we're going to work a little bit differently. And of course, we're going to take the tear gas arrow. That's not going to be the primary workhorse anymore on bosses. That's just going to be extra fun on bosses, extra damage, a little extra. We're going to take combat training because the massive amount of dodge you get from it is just that, pretty massive. 1,000 dodge for 8 points, I think I spent. Yeah, I got +1, obviously. That's just a lot of dodge. Can't wait to maximize that sucker. You'll be at 40% dodge late game. Another one we're still going to take is Masterful Archery. Even though it's got a really low activation chance, there's a lot of damage potential from it. So we might as well have it. Even if you divide all those numbers in thirds, saying that you get this to proc every third shot, it's still worth it. Obviously, we got to take Vibranium arrowheads. We want the brutal strikes. We want those super crits. We've got to have them. To make super crits happen, you have to crit. Super crits are a percentage of your crits turn into brutal strikes. I don't know why they call them brutal strikes. I think they should just call them super crits or brutal crits. Either way, that's what it is. And we need some kind of main form of damage, and obviously triple arrow is going to be our primary workhorse on this, especially with all those crits and brutal crits. This is going to be really, really good to have now. We're going to put 1 point in piercing arrows just so we have the chance of doing it. The proc chance is so little, it's just not worth putting points in. And we need some kind of mobility spell, skill. Getaway roll is going to be it. There's no other really good one. And that's it for the move and shoot. I'll go ahead and confirm it. I'll get my mouse buttons set up. Not a lot to do with other buttons. We're basically going to be firing an arrow. And we're going to be holding still. A lot of passive abilities still with Hawkeye, and that's the way he works. So let me go over here. And basically, you can see all the crits. That big red one was a super crit. You have a massive amount of crit rating. How is this happening? Well, first off, with the dodge buff at 1,000 dodge is 33% dodge. You're avoiding 1 out of 3 shots now. That's awesome for you. With all the passive buffs, you got a 32% chance to crit, which means every shot of triple strike should actually crit. With that brutal strike rating, you have a 7.3% chance for each crit to turn into a brutal strike. So that's just even more damage. And that's where the source of damage is coming from. Obviously, we can stand close and we'll get our artifact proccing if we move away. We'll get some lower numbers. I have the Talisman of Kunlun, and I'm using the Hammer Ordnance, and I'm using Bullseye Medallion. The crit hit chance is obviously mandatory. The more crit hits you get, the more chances you get at brutal strikes. The plus critical hit damage helps. It's not huge. It's just the critical rating. Lady Deathstrike could be used, and you wouldn't miss that critical hit damage. And maybe you'd like that extra movement speed. And the dot, I don't really care about the dot, which is why I go with Bullseye. On gear, the biggest thing you should get is health, and health regen. The way the defense works now, the more health and health regen you have, the more shots you can take, because you're offsetting a lot of the incoming damage. Obviously, defense should be worked in as a secondary primary, but without some kind of health regen, like this is the only bad part for me. I could swap this out for a Super Soldier Serum. I would not miss that damage at all, and all that health per second would be a massive help to you. If you're taking damage, you got to heal damage. He doesn't have a passive that lets him heal damage like some other classes. This is why that becomes not a mandatory, but a really strong idea. Sabretooth's metal is now phenomenal metal. Here's his little AoE. That's hitting pretty good. Look at all those crits. I mean, he's just doing massive damage now, single target. So that's awesome. He has no real spirit spender, so he can move and fire and move and fire. So that's going to be how it works. And this is his ultimate. I'll let the dots stop. They just kind of pierce everything. They do lots of damage everywhere. They put that debuff on. That's a heavy, heavy dot. Look at that. Lots of damage. His ultimate's now kind of fun. So that's Bullseye. I hope you guys enjoyed. Hope it helped. And I'll talk to you real soon.